Cool, guys. Well, yeah, welcome to the AMA with Bernard. And as many of you already know, because Bernard did our SEO video, Bernard's a SEO superstar. He runs Mushi Labs with his co-founder, which is essentially an SEO agency focusing on programmatic and more advanced SEO. And also is working on building some cool products out of there, which hopefully he can explain a little bit about later. Great background, also works at 500 Startups as a distro hacker in residence, which is what I did as well, which is how he and I know each other. And before that was at 42 Floors as a growth hacker. And that's where I believe you learned a lot about SEO, because SEO is a big component of that. But I'll let you, I have a great long list of questions. I'll let you kind of like introduce yourself, but thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me. I mean, I think Dom did a good job introducing me. I learned SEO at the startup that I used to work at called 42 Floors, which was essentially a Zillow for commercial real estate. So if you're not familiar with Zillow, basically Zillow just takes a lot of residential real estate data that they aggregate from government data and third-party sources and creates tens, if not hundreds of millions of landing pages based on that data, right? So you will have homes in San Francisco, and you also have townhomes in San Francisco and condos in San Francisco, but you also have homes in, you know, a certain neighborhood within San Francisco, so like financial district, and then townhomes and all of those categories. And then you have, you know, like homes for sale, homes for rent, and then all those like multiply into like different categories. And essentially we did the same approach at 42 Floors with commercial like real estate. So we'd say office space for rent in, you know, this neighborhood versus this market versus, you know, like commercial space or co-working space. And, you know, how do we programmatically basically make Google want to index and serve our page as number one, because, you know, we have the most relevant data and user experience for searchers who are looking for, you know, like San Francisco office space or something like that.
Yeah, it's a very complicated problem. So I'll just get started so we can get through everything. The first question is from one of our members, Shocker, who's building a marketplace. And his question essentially is, if you're building a marketplace, how does SEO differ for that versus like a normal e-commerce site? Are there any sort of fundamental differences that you should put into your plan?
Yeah, so when I hear the term marketplace, I automatically assume that, you know, you have a supply and like a demand, right? So for instance, Amazon has a supply of listers who will sell all kinds of things. And then Amazon has a lot of users who have like a demand for these things that are listed on Amazon. So the main key difference between a marketplace versus say like REI, which is just a normal like e-commerce site, is that the sellers are the ones who contribute the product data. And that's like the biggest sort of like difference between the marketplace and the non-marketplace. This is really important when it comes to SEO, because if your sellers are contributing really crappy data, then all of a sudden, like all of your pages that you're trying to get indexed by Google are really poor. So a marketplace that does a very good job incentivizing users to basically like dump their hearts and souls into their like listing, their marketplace listing, is Etsy. So the way that Etsy is really able to capitalize on this sort of thing is, first of all, they charge the seller or the supply like 20 cents to list an item on the Etsy marketplace. So that incentivizes the user to create like a high quality listing. 20 cents is not much in the grand scheme of things. And given like marketplace dynamics, some might even argue that like, why would you even charge your like lister? But they do that to ensure that like you're not just spamming, right? So we work with a client called Teespring, and a lot of the pages that get generated on Teespring are a lot worse in quality because Teespring kind of incentivizes users to create as many campaigns as they can and see what sticks to the wall. So when doing SEO for marketplaces, if you can incentivize users to generate or create a lot of great high quality photos, write really long product descriptions about, their custom knit like mittens or something, and take, like unique photos, then you will do much, much better as a marketplace. So non-marketplace sites don't need to they need to deal with this problem, but they're the lister. So they create the product description, they create the unique photos. So it's a different sort of like problem to tackle. But mainly it's, you want to how do you incentivize the user to give you like a good supply?
Good data. Yeah, that's a really great answer. I'm sure most people are familiar with kind of like the famous Thumbtack example, which is how they kind of skyrocketed with SEO, which is rather than asking contractors just to check boxes as to, do you fix doors, do you fix bathrooms, do you do this, they asked them specifically to talk about what it was that they did and why their customers love them. So it was like a more of an open-ended form. So Bernie, how do you actually do you agree with that strategy? Do you think it's a good strategy? B, how do you actually measure for quality and know which content is good, and how do you run quality control other than having somebody read over every single entry?
Yeah, I mean, it varies by scale, right? If you're just getting started, you can actually say have everyone read over every posting. But the ways that you would want to do it at a large scale are ways if you study SlideShare's onboarding process, they have a discoverability score. So you upload your presentation, and if you fill out your title tag, then your discoverability score goes from 0 to 10.
Okay.
And okay, well, now I should fill out my tags and my descriptions, and each one of these fields, your discoverability score just keeps going up. So kind of correctly educating sellers is the right play at a very large scale, right? Okay. This is why you should upload gorgeous photos, because you're going to be discovered in the marketplace better, because not only are you better equipped for SEO, but our internal algorithms will give you precedence if you have 2 photos and a unique description over someone that has no photos, right? You just rank higher in the SERPs because internally because your product is more desirable. That sort of education.
Okay, cool. Yep, that's very good. From another student, Ben Caby, who has a vaporizer app, he said that he just read an article about surfacing content from mobile apps, and that Google's going to have a whole new index specifically for mobile devices and making mobile app data a priority. Do you have any insight into that, and as to whether or not, what are the best steps to follow to jump on that trend?
Yeah, so Google's creating a new index for mobile devices, that did happen April 21st, 2015.
Okay.
So that was media termed it as mobile get-in, which was desktop queries and mobile queries are now separate, which means if I Googled food delivery in my desktop, then it's very conceivable that I can get different results on my mobile just based on user experience and page load speed. Those are the top 2 mobile considerations. You will get actually penalized in the mobile SERPs if your page takes a very long time to load, or it's not responsive, so it just causes poor user behavior. So when it comes to app indexing, There's two, like there's one like main benefit, and then there's one like side benefit. The
Okay.
main benefit is that when you set up like the app indexing API for your Android app, then you have the possibility to gain more exposure within the app's carousel in mobile search. So say you're like an alarm app, right? If someone Googles alarm app on their mobile phone, Google is starting to show like an app's carousel in the search results. And you like implementing app indexing gets you a chance to play at like ranking in those results. It doesn't guarantee that, oh, you just because you implemented it, they're going to give it to you, right? They're still going to test, oh, how is your app perform as number one, number two, number three in comparison to all the other people's apps.
Okay.
So that's the first point. And then the second, which is more of like a soft benefit, it generally applies to like very large like app like user bases, because it's the whole like notion of app indexing is that Google is able to crawl all of the data within your like app and potentially serve it as a deep link if it's already installed on your phone. Like the app is already installed on your phone.
Mm-hmm.
So the most common example is if you Google like a restaurant name and you get a Yelp like result in the SERPs and you have Yelp installed on your phone, then when you click on the restaurant, it's like Google will try to deep link you into the Yelp app, right? They'll be like, okay, open this in your app on your phone, and then you'll land on, you know, like the restaurant name in your Yelp app on your phone. So it's not like as great. It's not a great way to get more users, right? It could be a great way to serve better user experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yelp says, well, my mobile app is much better than my responsive web app. So let's try to send all the traffic into my mobile app because that's where I want them to go. Another consideration with, excuse me, app indexing is that Google has recently taken a stance that accelerated mobile pages, or AMP, is going to take priority over the deep link if you have both of them implemented. So if you wanted to like take advantage of mobile SEO, like you could think about implementing accelerated mobile pages.
What are those?
Oh. Yeah. So accelerated mobile pages are Google's way of basically like stealing your content. Basically, what you do when you implement accelerated mobile pages is you mark up a page that's completely static and you hand it over to Google and you say, okay, like this page, there's no dynamic content on it, right? It's not calling in objects from a database. It's just this piece of text. And Google wants you to basically do that because that dramatically increases page load speed.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that they're able to control that experience is you create this static piece of thing and you say, here's my AMP page for, you know, this topic. And then Google takes that and then now that content lives on their server. So they can contribute, they can basically jurisdict like the flow of how it gets served. So this is especially important for news and media websites where, you know, like someone writes some crazy Trump article and, you know, CNN all of a sudden gets like 50,000 concurrent connections to like that news article. That's bad from Google's perspective because they don't want to serve CNN's article that all of a sudden is now throttled and like no one can actually access the content. So they say, give us this static piece of content. It will live on Google's servers, and 50,000 connections, like whatever. We do like millions of connections like concurrently all the time. This is like easy peasy. And it's like, you do that, you give us that, then you're going to load in like, you know, half a millisecond. And this is great for everyone, right? And you're like, well, yeah, I mean, you're getting more traffic, but you actually own the content. And like, yeah, it's like our logos on it, but yeah, I mean, that's what they're doing with AMP.
So can you, two questions to further AMP, can you link out from AMP in your content to your site?
Yeah, you can.
And can you constantly do new fetches so that you can refresh your data?
See, that's the other problem with AMP. It's like it only like e-commerce sites struggle with AMP for like two reasons, because like the fetch is like Google decides when to fetch the new content. So you could conceivably like sell out of like some item, except the amped like cached version on Google still says like, oh, there's like 100 like quantity. So like Google kind of decides when they're going to like next fetch like your AMP like static page. And then the second thing is like, if you have a form, like Google can't, like AMP doesn't work with forms because that's not static, right? It's a dynamic like post or get request from the server, and then that just doesn't work.
Okay.
So mainly news and media sites that have implemented AMP have been able to see more exposure through AMP than like all the other kinds of websites.
Okay.
AMP is still an experiment that Google is trying. It's been trying it for the last like year, and we'll see how it goes.
Okay, sounds good. Dion, you had some questions. Do you want me to ask them, or do you want to jump in and ask them?
Yeah, I can jump in.
Cool.
So right now, basically, I've got a marketplace. It's pretty new, and we're rebuilding sort of our URL structure to support the next phase of our growth. So I've got a couple of questions just on things to be aware of. The first one is, are longer domain names that are descriptive better, or is it better to be as short as possible?
Yeah, so that's something that has gone back and forth in just the SEO community. It's the concept of exact match domain, right? If you're selling like a down pillow and you have downpillows.com versus, some branded, like you have abc.com and abc.com sells like down pillows. And that's purely a matter of like preference is what Google like SEOs would like to say. I still am inclined to believe that if your website or your domain is really just designed to do like or sell a particular product or do a particular thing, then having an exact match domain, like it indirectly helps your SEO through better click-through rates. So if I was like browsing for down pillows and I Googled down pillows and I saw abc.com/down-pillows and then I saw downpillows.com, like maybe I might click on your result like 20%, maybe users might click on your result 20% more than abc.com/down-pillows. But it's like, you can build a brand around like REI, for instance, and then, your click-through rates for that are probably going to be better than downpillows.com. So I say it's purely a matter of preference, but from an SEO like perspective, it doesn't really matter.
Okay, that's cool. I knew in the video you talked about adding all the different variants of your domain in the Search Console. Right. So I've just done that because I just have the main one. We do have like an HTTPS and then don't have the www. So I've added that, and I've added the HTTP variants as well. But do I need to go in and like create sitemaps and upload those for all the variants, or is it, it's just on the main one? Is that cool?
Yeah, if it's just on the main one, that's cool.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay,
it's just that.
Dominic, cut me off if I'm
No.
I'm here.
Good.
Quick, I've got a dream to change my domain name from what I have today to something shorter if I can purchase it in the future. Does that mean I'm starting from scratch with SEO, or is there a way to get around that if I do achieve
Yeah. So, I mean, you're not starting from zero, but you're not starting from like 100% either. I think from past experience, I have like helped a friend transfer Urban Compass to compass.com. And we saw about like around a 50% drop in like search traffic overnight, even though we did everything like by the book. And the reason why this happens is because Google just can't give you credit for transferring everything over all at once. The reason is there's a lot of spammers who will be looking at expired domains. And once a domain expires, like they go, oh, well, we'll just take this and then transfer everything over. And so Google kind of has to first look at it and say, well, like, does this look legitimate? You know, like, how are they transferring the content over? Is it, you know, like a page that says like down pillows going to, you know, like weight loss pills? It's like, okay, that's bad. Like, let's just throw this all out.
Yeah.
So if you do it all, like I would say you're suffering like minus 20% like in the long term, because it's like not all of it will transfer. And then like the right way to transfer it all is literally just like a 301 from abc.com to xyz.com / like new content, right? It's like old content to new content. It just like shifts in living in a different place, right? And then you want to keep as few things changed as possible, right? You don't want to say, okay, let's launch a new redesign and add a new content, and then 301 all of our older domain onto this new domain, because Google's going to be like, okay, what the fuck, right? You want to go, okay, we want ABC to XYZ. Let's just transfer all the old to the new, and then like we'll wait for like 3 months, and then you know you'll probably suffer initially 50%, and then it'll slowly get better. But things that will like always just kind of be dead will kind of be like your brand, right? If people are Googling ABC, like why should they show like XYZ,
Yeah.
right? That sort of thing. So those are things to keep in mind when like switching top level domains.
Okay. Last question. So my marketplace is essentially a way for people to find cool experiences and activities to do to enjoy with their friends. One of the features on the platform is the ability to write reviews and rate experiences after you've gone on them. What's your take on like how helpful is that for SEO, and any thoughts on how to like get the snowball rolling down the hill when it comes to seeding reviews and incenting people to?
Yeah, so generally speaking, like reviews are great, right? And reviews are great because they help other users figure out whether or not they want to purchase like the experience. That's generally why, you know, you see sites that like Amazon just crush everyone, because they've built a flywheel of accumulating user generated reviews that like dominate. Not only that, you can implement a schema.org, which is a rich snippet, which is how you get the stars to show up in your search engine results page. So if you check out like schema.org, which is like schema.org/reviews, you'll see, oh, okay, this is just the snippet that I need to put on my web page. And then if Google deems that your reviews are legitimate, then they'll show up for those experiences. My guess, like for your specific marketplace of experiences, that you know you want to rank category experiences like outdoor, like hiking, or you know like outdoor skydiving, like those sorts of things, or like water activities, outdoor activities, those things And then you want to specifically rank the experience itself, right? Like white water rafting in like somewhere. So the reviews will definitely help in the same way that like Yelp has great reviews around category pages and then the restaurant itself. The way to like get the review machine going, everyone kind of has their own rough starts, but a lot of people initially, you know, will maybe seed reviews, whether they're not like real or like, yeah, like fake reviews are a way that, you know, people get reviews off the ground. It's questionable for sure, but that's what some people do. Or else it's really like heavily incentivizing your users to leave a review after the trip, right? So after, you know, someone goes on an experience, it's like, hey, you know, we would love to hear your thoughts about this and how we can make it better. And here is $25 off your next experience on our marketplace, right? So other than that, you know, like Yelp has implemented Yelp Elite, which is like, hey, if you leave like us hundreds of reviews, right? If you just write all this great UGC and upload all these photos, then like you're cool and we'll invite you to like an exclusive like restaurant opening. And then users are like, oh yeah, I want to be cool. I want to be like in on the new shit. So I will write all this great stuff for you. So I get this like badge, right? Gamification of reviewing, which is usually only is able to happen like at scale. So I think just heavy incentivization plus maybe initially seeding like some reviews for experiences that don't have any reviews could be like the way to go.
Okay, awesome. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. No problem, Dion.
That's great. Thank you, Bernie. So a little bit on that note, this is a question from Kim, is how to get a business profile in Google searches for SaaS businesses if you don't have a physical address. So the example Kim had was like, for example, Salesforce. And Kim, I just see you're on the call now. So you can jump in too if you have any specific questions about that.
Right. Okay. So yeah, if you don't have like a specific physical location, generally speaking, like most businesses, like Salesforce itself, like has an office, right, that they claim as their like address. So I just like Googled Salesforce to see, and they have like an address, a phone number, and that does come from Google My Business. But if you're like literally location agnostic and you know you are a digital nomad and you're living in like Chiang Mai, Thailand, like then it's up to Google's discretion, right? Like some brands won't have a Google My Business. Like if you Googled Reddit, right, that doesn't have like a specific Google My Business with a map pack and a phone number, but they are a big enough brand such that Google is like, well, they deserve it. So we'll just create this like knowledge graph panel and put it on like the SERPs. But other than that, it besides Google My Business, like you just kind of have to become a brand, which is really hard.
Because I went to like the google.com/business, and because I didn't have an address, I couldn't like proceed. Or was it even an address? I was having issues anyway.
I see.
Yeah, I just couldn't. Oh yeah, because I didn't have a physical location, I couldn't create this profile.
Yeah, I mean, that is the problem with Google My Business, is that it requires like a physical locale. Okay. And if your business is location agnostic, then like, I guess you can't do it.
Okay.
Yeah, I've had problems. You can set up a virtual post office box too, which you can get mail to. That could help.
Okay.
Like I think it's VPM.
Yeah.
So there's This question is around keyword planning. So can you explain a little bit about the discrepancy between Google's keyword planning tool and why there's such a large range based on their spend on AdWords, and how a brand, when they're trying to figure out the accuracy of keywords, how they can best kind of like figure out which keywords are the right ones to go after?
Yeah, so in AdWords, it's a recent rollout to say like new advertisers or advertisers with very low or no monthly spend. They give you keyword like monthly search volume ranges where they'll say, oh, this is like between 1K and 10K, which kind of sucks because like there's a huge difference between 1K and 10K. Using a third-party tool that uses the Google AdWords like API, something like Keyword Keg, would be a good way of getting search results that are like not ranges. And
That's great.
what was the other, like the
follow-on? That was the question. Is like, are there other resources to look at? So Keyword Keg, it sounds like, is a good third-party tool.
Yeah, so there's Keyword Keg. There's also keywordtool.io.
Okay.
Which is more of a keyword suggestions like tool, and it doesn't give like average monthly search volume unless you pay them like $49 a month. But
okay,
I like it for keyword research, which is kind of on this like list of questions as well.
Well, yeah. So now, since we're on the topic of keywords, can we talk in AdWords? Exact phrase, modifiers, broad match, all that stuff really comes into play with what shows, right? Does that play into SEO in any capacity? And how should somebody decide what keywords to use if there could be potential misspellings or split words like long tail versus long tail? Can you speak to that?
Yeah. So in AdWords, like, having an exact phrase that's like long dash tail and long space tail would be two like different keywords you're bidding against. However, in SEO, like it plays off a completely different algorithm, and that one will just correct commonly misspelled words and pair together like acronyms or synonyms that it thinks is like relevant, right? So you don't have to make a new landing page or piece of content if you want to target CTA button versus call to action button, right? Google SEO is smart enough to just pair those together and say, well, that's the same thing. And if you have a page about CTA buttons, then it should also rank for call to action buttons because they're just the same. So you don't actually have to worry about like, say like commonly misspelled words. Modifiers and phrase match and broad match do like matter, right? If you do a query for, like the best headphones, that's markedly different than, like top headphone, or not markedly different, but there's certain like categories where, like cheap versus best. Yeah, there you go. Like the best headphones and like the best cheap headphones or cheap headphones, that modifier is going to be significantly different with different intent. And then broad match is like all over the place, right? If you Google red shoe, like, or you're bidding on like shoe, like broad match will like surface like, like woolen socks or something. And it's like, that's just totally off from like the intent. So they don't really come into play, but SEO handles commonly misspelled words, and it knows how to link kind of like exact phrases like that make sense like closely with each other.
Okay, perfect. That's really good to know. And then on that note, is there a certain number of keywords that companies, or a certain range of keywords that companies who are starting out should try to shoot for actually ranking for?
Yeah, so like commonly when websites are like first starting out, like content agencies will recommend what's called like a pillar, like a page pillar approach, which is like, can you create a piece of content that makes you an authority around a specific like topic or keyword. Like, okay, can we create a piece of content around, you know, like the best outdoor like experiences, right? Like in Toronto, Canada. And then like you have this list of like 15 or 20, and it's like gorgeously has like the photos where, hey, you could go hiking here. Here's the best skydiving place. If you want to go on hikes, these are the best hikes, these sorts of things. Because it's better to start by saying, I am like the content authority on, you know, like outdoor activities in Toronto, and then branch into outdoor activities in Vancouver, or, you know, branch into indoor activities in Toronto. So you want to definitely start strong and target, you know, just a few things, and then like slowly branch out from there.
Okay, so that would be the strategy that you would use to try and rank for long tail keywords as well too, right?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. That was another question. Can you explain the complicated word canonical a little bit more detail?
Yeah, so a canonical is a suggestion tag to Google that says that this page belongs as a subset of this other page. So most predominantly, the use case came up with canonicals in e-commerce, where you would have an e-commerce page, say it sells shoes, like hiking boots or something, and there would be like a small, or, you know, size like 9, size 8, size 10, size 11, and each one of these pages were different pages, right? It changed like a parameter within the URL that says like size question mark equals 10, and then size question mark equals 9, and then you could change the color, right? So it'd be like color question mark equals like blue, and all of these URL params count as unique URLs within Google. But webmasters were saying, well, like this is unfair because you started penalizing sites with duplicate content, and you know, you look at my like size like 9 blue shoe, and you look at like my size 8 blue shoe, and you're like, oh, this is duplicate content, and you're penalizing me. How can you do this? So Google's like, okay, well, in that case, you should canonical these like different pages back to just the one hiking boot like shoe page, and that will get rid of all of your like duplicate content pages. So that's kind of how it initially came out, except people then, you know, started to abuse canonicals because they say, okay, well, you know, what if we gave a seller, like on a marketplace, a page, and it looks like a completely different page than what it's actually canonical to, like on our site. So the seller says, oh, okay, well, I have this like unique page that, you know, it's all mine branded, and then they like add in all their content, and they're like, cool. But actually, you know, the webmaster is saying, well, oh, when you look at this page, no, it's actually just a subset of my page, which has like all of my branding on it, and, you know, some of the users like content. So Google has said, okay, well, in that instance, people are abusing canonicals, and, you know, we'll take them merely as suggestions. So canonicals are usually used to link together multiple pages of the same page type, like within a like specific product or item or whatever, but they're purely suggestions.
Okay, that's a very clear explanation. I believe I will always know what canonical means from now on.
Good.
In that vein, also, can you explain a little bit about redirects? You don't, like, not specifically every single type of redirect, but primarily like 301 redirects, and like how link juice is transferred.
Yeah.
And
so
when it might be used is an example.
Yeah. So a 301 redirect means that it's a permanent redirect in Google's eyes. 301 says this page like is now permanently this other page. So instances where permanent redirects are used are when you have, you know, a non-www and a www, and you're like, oh, well, like I use my www as the namespace, then you would use a 301 to say anyone that lands on the non-www should get the www, and it's a permanent, like, this is where the site lives. Other like reasons why you would use a 301 is if you used to have a piece of blog content that you wrote that you figured out was actually like a phenomenal evergreen piece of content. Say you said it was like, you know, how to save taxes in 2015. And you got like tons of search traffic for it, and you're like, well crap, like I want to use this in 2016 too. Then, you know, you can create a new piece of content that's like how to create, like, save tax money in 2016, and then 301 like that and say, okay, well, this is the new like updated version of how to save money on like your thing. Reasons why you should not use 301s is like in a soft like redirect context. So Google defines soft redirect as if you had a page that would 404, which means that it's temporarily unavailable, whether you deleted it or, you know, some user removed their content off the page, you should definitely not 301 that page to your home page. That's basically called a soft redirect that 301s are commonly used for, but it's like a bad like user experience, and Google like slaps people on the wrist when they say, oh, well, this page like no longer exists and we're just going to send them to the home page. It's like, no, Google wants you to say, no, this page just no longer exists, and then within your 404 you can say, oh, sorry, this is gone, but, you know, like things that you might also find interesting are, you know, like these experiences, even though we don't have this one anymore.
Okay, interesting.
So you don't want to use a 301 in that sense.
Okay.
But anytime you want to use a redirect, and this is like briefly getting into all the other crazy types of redirects, there's JavaScript redirect, there's a meta tag redirect, there's a 307, and there's a 302. Like, always just use a 301. Like, everything else is like kind of a little bit shadier, or it indicates that it's like temporary.
Okay, interesting. So that kind of leads us into the next like grouping of questions, which is around like penalties and stuff like that. But we're kind of running out of time. But before jumping into the penalty stuff, the whole Medium versus WordPress thing comes up a whole lot, right? And Medium has recently also allowed you to essentially, this is probably tied in with redirects, recently allowed you to start adding your white label URL, right? Now, just because they let you add the URL in there, does that actually mean that your site is gaining domain authority for the content that you post on Medium, or is that still all rolling up to Medium because they're still hosting it?
Yes. So, I mean, the short answer is your site is gaining the authority if you're using the white label like SEO thing, or the white label
URL.
Platform. Yeah, the URL. So, I mean, the most notable is that 37 Signals blog, like Signal versus Noise, was ported over to like Medium from like a custom or maybe a WordPress install, and, you know, their content still like ranks on its own. So I don't think you need to really worry about, you know, like Medium cannibalizing your authority because you're using it as a CMS, a white label like content management system.
Okay, so essentially like using Medium's new white label feature is, well, I guess it's not that new anymore, but it's relatively new, is basically the same as using WordPress hosted solution with their URLs, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's very interesting. Now, that kind of helps us. That helps a lot of people get away from the dilemma of duplicated content. And this came up in the Facebook group as well too. But is there kind of a rule of thumb specifically around how much like how to reuse content but not be penalized for duplication?
Yeah. Generally speaking, like if you publish a piece of content that you want to reuse, like on, LinkedIn or Medium itself or Quora, like you would want to post the original piece of content on whatever platform that you would want to rank in the search results. And then if you posted it elsewhere, like Medium has an importer, if you're on WordPress, that you can import that content into Medium, and then it will self-add a canonical. This is another like good use of canonical, is to say that, oh, this is an exact copy of this other article, but this one is the original, right? So this is like, you should just like credit this page with the original piece of content. Other things that people do are they'll like include a sentence that's like, oh, this post first appeared on like xyzblog.com like at this date, and then the article gets posted. I think if you want to, like extract like, snippets of your original piece of content and use them like to answer Quora like questions and that sort of thing, like it's cool too. And if you could somehow squeeze in like a link, like, oh, like this originally appeared on, or this like snippet of answer came from this blog, like that's like what in an ideal world would look like.
Okay, cool. Very thorough answer. So speaking about penalties and like stuff like that, what are some of the blacklist things that people should stay away from? For example, you mentioned purchasing expired domains. That was one of the questions. Like, that's a no-no in the eyes of Google. Are there certain things that people like that might be popularized that seem attractive that people should shy away from?
Well, I mean, first and foremost comes like acquiring backlinks.
Okay.
Like, you should be wary of anybody or any entity that you approach and like says, hey, I can sell you some backlinks, because there's almost always some sort of like strings attached. When it comes to penalization, backlinks are certainly one of the more like sensitive like subjects. Other things that people may get penalized for, and this is like, more old school ways of doing things, but like spinning content, right? That's what people would say in 2005. What people would say in 2016 is like natural language generation, which is basically spinning content, but doing it in a more like organic, artificial way by like integrating all these different like data sources. I think that.
What does spinning content mean? What does spinning content mean?
Oh, it means generally you like have this like article and you put it into a content spinner, and it just like swaps like words and sentences around such that the like article looks unique but just got spun like from another piece of content. And so people would spin content like all the time to, just generate unique content in Google's eye.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, some people use natural language generation to like great lengths. I think Zillow does a good job by saying, oh, homes in San Francisco rose at 6.7%, but this home, like, this home was above average because it rose at like 8.2. And, like this neighborhood is performing much better than that neighborhood because they're doing it in a way that it actually probably conceivably helps the user, right? If you're just spinning content to like meet a number of like words on a page, then that's different than saying, well, yeah, this is like generating like content, but it's a way that like users would want to consume this content anyways. But that's how some people get penalized. Other people that could get penalized are like sites that do like aggregation, right? Like in the past, there was a lot more sites that were like, oh, well, this is just us stealing all the content from everywhere and putting it on our website. It's like Google like slapped down on that and said, no, like if you want to like aggregate content and like steal it from everyone, then all of the credit should go to the original source, not you. However, you know, Pinterest is like the biggest content stealer, and they get away with good SEO because the users actually create value for searchers, right? If I'm searching for the best Thanksgiving recipes and someone on Pinterest has actually curated a list of the best Thanksgiving recipes on like a board, then that is actual value from an aggregation standpoint, which is why Pinterest gets away with stealing everyone's content and ranking for, you know, categorical or board type like queries.
Cool.
Yeah, what are other black hat?
You just made me think about Thanksgiving. So one question from Kim was like, have you heard of any brands or blogs getting penalized from Google for not creating a no follow link when the link is sponsored?
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I can't name any specifically off the top of my head, but they're getting very like stickler about like brands. I know like Huffington Post is like under investigation. So it's like Business Insider, because I know Business Insider definitely has a lot of sponsored like PR. Huffington Post also is under inquiry because a lot of the journalists like could be getting compensated, or I mean some of them are getting compensated for like the articles that they write or portions of it. So they're like, both of those entities are like under scrutiny, but there are certainly things like websites that have visibly been like punished by Google. Like Google has come out and said like, yeah, like stop doing that. We're going to like destroy your like domain authority. And then there's a lot of other blogs and websites that have been soft penalized, which is that Google hasn't come out and said, oh, like we're slapping you like on the wrist, but within the algorithm, there is an adjustment made on that website because they've algorithmically or manually picked up on the fact that they are like doing sponsored posts for money, because like either it says like contact me for sponsored posts, and then Google's algorithms like, oh, like sponsored posts, like all right, like we'll put a dampener on the links coming out of this domain. So it happens a lot, and sometimes not like visibly.
How do you know if you're being penalized? Do you just see search volume go down?
Yeah, I mean, so you know, like in Webmaster Tools, they will like send you a notice if you're being like manually penalized.
Oh, okay.
Right? But the algorithmic penalties are a lot harder to discern. Typically speaking, like up till this point, I think like this is maybe like one of the last points where Google has actually come out and said, oh, this is an algorithmic release, right? Like Penguin 4.0 came out September 21st or something. And they're like, oh, but this is the last of like Penguin, which is an algorithmic penalty designed to filter like backlink spamming like people. So in the past, like the Moz has a great like date list of when all of the algorithm releases were like released. So they'd be like Penguin 2, Panda 2, Penguin 3, Hummingbird, Payday Loan. And you could actually match up like your Google Analytics with those dates and see, oh, okay, well, Panda 4 came out on this date and like my traffic just like went to the gutter. You could say, well, then I have like a backlink problem. But as of Penguin 4.0, I don't know if Google is actually going to release any more dates. So you just, if things like start going down and to the right, like, then you're probably getting penalized. But up until this point, you could go back to the list of like algorithmic like release dates and then see if you can draw correlations with your Google Analytics, Google organic search traffic like graph.
Okay, cool. And then the last question that I have really is more around how somebody should go about finding an SEO consultant or an SEO expert to work with them. Since you do this so much, and this is something that, you know, a lot of people look for. There's a lot of snake oil out there. Like, what are the things to kind of watch out for? What are the things that somebody should look for? You know, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, that's tough. I have like a very, very short list of like SEO experts that like I even recommend people to. I think that SEO itself, like technical SEO itself, is dying. I think in like 2 to 5 years, like technical SEO or SEO itself might just be like completely dead, save for like very large, complicated websites like Amazon and Yelp and like Stack Overflow. The reason why is because I think Google is just engineering everything, right? They know, oh, okay, well, you have some JavaScript. We can't read it, but we'll figure out how to read it. Oh, your page isn't loading like very quickly. Like, oh, well, we'll load it like once and then we'll cache it. So like we don't have to load it again. And then we'll just serve the cached version. So like we don't need to ever go back to your website to see if like the content has changed. Obviously, they would like prefer not to do that. They prefer to see if the content has changed, especially if it's like a really good piece of content. But I would say that instead of like going about finding an SEO expert, like I would think about, okay, well, how can we create great content, right? At the end of the day, search engine optimization's goal is to create answers for people's questions, right? When people are Googling, where should I eat? They have a question or they have a problem, like how to get over my migraine or my cold, right? And content is the answer to those like questions. So it's all about like creating the most like relevant piece of content to answer people's questions. And SEO in the traditional sense of like, oh, like, are your title tags good? How old is your domain? Like, none of this in theory should matter as much as having great content. So I think if you want to invest in the long term, you just want to actually invest in like great content writing, great content marketers, and SEO will naturally come. Like organic search traffic will naturally come. Also, like, you know, if you're on WordPress or you're on Medium or you're on, you know, Ruby on Rails and all of these like fairly robust tools, like they have all like kind of mostly solved for like SEO already. So that's why I also wouldn't worry about like changing your header tags. But of course, you know, like the basics are the basics, and finding someone to do a technical audit is a lot better than, say, finding someone to, you know, like write your content and build backlinks, which is like more shady.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. Focus on content. Focus on great content that solves people's problems. Do you want to explain? We just hit 9 o'clock, so we'll jump off right now. But do you want to just talk a bit about Mushi and the types of companies you work with?
Yeah. So Mushi Labs, we started SEO consulting about 1.5 years ago, and we've since worked with, you know, a dozen or so high growth startups, ranging from, you know, like Teespring to, which does like e-commerce for t-shirts, to DoorDash, which is like a food delivery service competing with Grubhub, Seamless, Eats24, and like Build Zoom, which is competing against like Thumbtack. So throughout all of this, like we've done a crap ton of research against Yelp, Eats24, Grubhub, Thumbtack, Home Advisor, and all these other like sorts of websites to figure out what SEO hacks per se that they're doing. I would say that Thumbtack is certainly on the bleeding edge of pushing the bounds of SEO, in the sense that like they're probably the most SEO optimized like website there is. They do all the things, which means that at any given point in time, if Google were to like crack down on SEO, like they could see a tremendous hit. But right now they're like performing pretty well.
Okay, great. Well, hey, it's a little bit over. I want to thank you so much for jumping on the call with us.
Of course.
I recorded this, so I'm going to share this with the whole group. And yeah, I'll see you soon. Okay.
Yeah, sounds good.
Right. Bye, everyone.
Later.